When the Pontiac GTO first burst onto the scene, it brought the muscle car era as we know it with it. From 1964 on, Pontiac kept on iterating on their new muscle car darling, stuffing it with bigger engines, better suspension, and better brakes. As a result, performance increased massively in just a few short years. But that increase came at a cost. Prices of the GTO had to climb to keep up with inflation and to offset the cost of the newly acquired performance tech. While the GTO was a premium muscle car, Pontiac did not want to lose out on the younger customers who couldn't afford it. They wanted to give them a slice of that GTO performance for cheap. And as such, they built the ultimate stripper spec Pontiac performance machine, a car that had 90% of the performance of a GTO without any of the extra frills. And in the case of a select few cars, these may have been, for many, a better choice than the Pontiac GTO itself. This is the story of the incredibly rare 455 HO equipped 1971 Pontiac GT-37. Now, to put it in perspective, many of you probably haven't even heard of the GT-37 because it was actually a pretty low production model. It was technically a trim package for the Pontiac T-37, which was basically a Pontiac Le Mans with even less options. It was unveiled in 1970 as a gateway car into the Pontiac brand. So much cost cutting was done with the base model T-37s that their sticker price started around just $2,600, which made it even cheaper than a base model Chevelle, which had historically been the cheapest mid-sized car offered by GM. Undercutting Chevy showed that Pontiac meant business. But the base T-37s were by no means performance cars. At $2,600, you got an inline-six that could maybe sneak up on a Pinto, but that was about it. At the low price ranges, it was purely a utilitarian vehicle. But since Pontiac took so much out of their T-37s, that did give them a pretty expansive options list that buyers could explore and add on for their own car. And for the buyer that valued speed, there were plenty of choices for him to add on to turn the lowly T-37 into a budget brawler. In 1970, when it came to engine choices for the T-37, there were three V8 options: the Pontiac 350 and two Pontiac 400s. The 350 made a modest 250 horsepower, and the 400s made either 265 horsepower or a whopping 345 horsepower in top trim. This would put the T-37 just 15 horsepower behind the big 360 horse 455 cubic inch GTOs of the same year. Couple these engines with the optional GT-37 package, and the distance from the T-37 to the GTO got even smaller. The GT-37 package was a trim package for the base T-37 that added a whole new personality to it. It featured an option of 3 different bold side stripes that ran along the side of the car depending on when the car was produced in the production run. It also had GT-37 badging on the rear fenders, the grille, and the deck lid for a more austere appearance. A 3-speed floor-shifted manual with a Hurst shifter was standard as part of the GT-37 package. On the GT-37 equipped cars, they also got dual exhaust cutouts and the actual exhaust system from a GTO, hood pins, and some nice optional wheels that added muscle car credibility to the budget bruiser. Buyers could choose from plain colors all the way up to vibrant ones like Cardinal Red and Tropical Lime. And a rear deck spoiler was also available for extra flair. These exterior upgrades ensured that the GT-37 looked every bit the part of a budget-friendly GTO alternative, and it helped distance it from the T-37 cars with the inline-six. And the gap between the GTO and the GT-37 got even smaller in 1971. Under the hood for 1971, the 350 Pontiac V8 and the mid-ranged Pontiac 400 remained, but the 345 horse 400 from the previous year was now replaced with a 455 cubic inch mill that made 325 horsepower, now making the GT-37 just 10 horsepower lower than the 455 HO motors in the GTO. But wait, what if I told you that you could actually get the 335 horse HO 455 from the GOAT in the GT-37? Yep, oddly enough, Pontiac let customers for that 1 year get the D-port-headed 455 in the GTO's baby brother. Now, apparently only 50 or so people were crazy enough to opt for this engine in the GT-37 versus just getting the GTO, but nonetheless, they did. With 450 plus foot-pounds of torque at its disposal, believe it or not, this was actually one of the fastest muscle cars that you could buy in 1971. And with only 50 people ordering it, it also makes it one of the rarest. The standard 3-speed manual stayed for 1971 with the GT-37 cars, but you could also have your GT-37 paired with an optional 4-speed M20, M21, or M22 manual, or a Turbo 400 automatic. A safety track rear end was also available with optional gear ratios spanning the performance-oriented 355s, 390s, and even apparently 433s. An overwhelming majority of the 455 equipped GT-37s were sold with the 4-speed, but a handful did end up leaving the factory with the automatic. For the manual cars, low 14-second quarter-mile times were easily doable, and high 13s were well within reach for the HO cars. On the GT-37 cars, four-wheel drums were standard, with power-assisted discs being an option for the front. While the powertrain underneath the GT-37 was almost identical to the GTO, its suspension was not. The GTO was a much more compliant handler than the GT-37 thanks to its added rear sway bars and better suspension damping. The GT-37, to make up for a lack of a rear sway bar, used stiffer rear springs, which didn't work as well and gave the car a rougher ride on the street. As for the GTO, well, it was always going to be the king of the Pontiac lineup. And even though the GT-37 cars represented great value for dollar, if you were to option one out with the bigger engine and the 4-speed and some other goodies, then prices could certainly climb into the $4,000 plus range, which brought it really close to the GTO, and that sort of defeated the point of the budget-friendly GT-37. At the lower trim levels, the 350 3-speed GT-37s were a good value per dollar, but at the higher end, it came down to seeing if buyers could be swayed by a few $100s in cost savings or more by the prestigious GTO name. And it turns out the GTO name won more of them over. In 1971, about 10,000 GTOs were sold, with just around 7,000 GT-37s being sold from 1970 through 1971 when they finally ended production. In 1972, Pontiac replaced the GT-37 with the Le Mans GT. The Le Mans GT was essentially a continuation of the GT-37's concept, offering the sporty styling and strong performance in a less GTO-esque package. However, it now lacked the raw, stripped-down character of the GT-37, and it was instead leaned more into an upscale vibe. And by the mid-1970s, even the Le Mans GT was overshadowed by the shift to personal luxury cars over performance, and the writing was on the wall. Though its time was brief, the Pontiac GT-37 remains a testament to Pontiac's ability to delivering performance to all buyers, even those with limited budgets. Its rarity, especially with the 455 HO models, makes it a highly prized collector car today. The GT-37 encapsulated the ethos of the muscle car era: bold, brash, and built to thrill. And for many people, the GT-37 represented a gateway into the drug that we know as performance. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd ever heard of the 455 GT-37s, and more importantly, if you have any stories about them from your own life. I would love to hear them. And thank you all for watching. Sorry for my voice this video, I'm getting over being sick. But anyway, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out. And otherwise, until next time, enthusiasts,